that okay?
Yeah,
so
sure.
It's not just
if you want, I might have it might reach over this way.
You can do either.
And then we can maybe set it on this here if you want. There might be this chair maybe.
Yeah, that'd be fine. Yeah, that reaches all.
That way you don't have to have it hanging on the floor.
Yeah. Falls halfway through. Hi, come on in. Hi. Sit wherever. We can get you to sign in there. Sure.
Must be a brand new pen.
And this one little dot on
Yeah. My husband's coming in a minute here.
Okay.
Let's hold this spot.
That is for you guys. And handouts, guys, you get to keep these, so you can feel free to take whatever notes on them you want. Take them home with you. Come on in. This is for you. Thank you. You can sign in for me. Do you have a pen? I can get a pen. That one, okay.
Oh, I did it again.
Do you know if there's pizza?
Oh, pizza? Yeah, there should be coming.
Okay.
Yeah. Now down there.
All right. Do I have a minute to wash my hands in
Yeah.
water?
Go right ahead. Do you know where the bathroom is? Yeah.
Yeah, it's on the way. I guess the pizza driver's a little bit late.
Okay. So we will have pizza here in a few minutes. Okay. All right. So we'll get started as soon as that other lady comes back. Are we expecting a couple more? You said
My husband's on his way. Yeah.
Okay.
Started yet. You need to sign that sheet.
Yeah, I have it here.
Oh.
You can sign that for me.
So Jim, maybe if we have that mic a little bit closer up to the collar area.
Okay.
For some reason, I think on the fabric, it's just kind of moving back and forth.
Is it the part
Yeah, I believe so. Maybe if
with the
we-
magnet or something? That's what you're doing?
No, you could actually put on, yeah, there we go. Maybe,
Keep it off.
is that too awkward for you though? Okay.
Connecting that all up.
All right.
And I don't know that she did it.
So everybody, do you need to sign up or sign up? Not a sign up. The
Yeah,
worksheet.
she wants us to get 3
The
days.
worksheet, and did you sign in?
From down to it.
That actually looks perfect. Can we do that
Saturday.
Good to know.
If need be. These could be in the evening or early morning because you can all wait until that would be.
All right, well, we can go ahead and get started. There will be pizza in a few minutes. We'll let you know when that gets here, and then you can run out to the hall and grab some dinner. Okay, so we are here for Core 3 Attachment. My name is Julie Briggs. I've been with Hope and Home for about 4 years now. I mostly do home studies, so I may be doing some of your home studies. And I'm also a mother of 4. 2 of our kids we adopted when they were 6 and 2 years old. And I am a counselor. So that's a little bit of my background. I would like to hear from you guys, you can give me your name, if you have any children in the home right now, and then what is the age range that you're open to right now. So if you want to get us started.
Ashley Walker, no children, and 0 to, 17 years, 11 months, and 39 days.
Okay, we'll take it. That's a pretty good range. Awesome.
My name's Laura Broderick, no kids, and right now I'm doing respite for 0 to 18 or short-term placements 6 to 11.
Okay.
Me? I'm Joy. Carol. And I have no kids and no husband. Age range, can't really do infants, but pretty much 1 to young school age, 7 or so.
Okay.
That's kind of what I'm open to. Any race, any gender, anything like that.
Awesome.
I'm Marcia, and my age range is 0 to 17, depending on the time of year.
Okay. So bigger age range tonight. What about you, Becky?
Hi, I'm Catherine. I am the new home supervisor at Hope and Home, so I'm just taking the classes right now and just going through all of them.
Very good. You guys?
Randy and Julia Hodges. I think we're starting out with respite, so maybe we want to talk to you. And probably the ages, if it's respite, maybe infant on up. We actually told them in elementary school on up, but
Okay.
I don't know. We really don't know what we're doing yet, so we're just going to
You're here to figure it out.
Yes.
We have no kids.
We have no kids at home, but we have enough bedrooms to have kids there, so yeah.
Okay. And have you had children?
Yes, yeah, ours are growing in their 20s and out on their own.
Okay. All right. Awesome. Well, thanks for being here tonight, guys. So I would love to start with a little bit of discussion, and then we're going to dive in and watch a video. So if we can kind of split the group here, let's do you 3 and you 4 for your little discussion groups. For this group over here, is that you're at work and the police have just shown up to work and said that there was a fire in your neighborhood, you can't go home, they're loading you up on buses and taking you to strangers' houses to stay at until everything gets sorted out. So, looks like pizza's here. You can get pizza and then discuss, so I'll give you your scenarios first. We got a couple seats up here if you'd like. So what I would love to hear from you guys is kind of how are you feeling right now, and what is the stuff that you were thinking about at home that you wish you had time to go back and get? So, hi, what are your names?
Karen.
Okay.
Kevin.
Awesome. Do you guys have kids in the home now? How old?
7 and 12.
Okay. And what's kind of your age range? So I already made everyone do this. So what's your age range that you're open to for fostering?
I think it was 0 to 12.
Okay. Awesome. Very good. Okay. So we're just about to break up into a little discussion. So these 2 tables are discussing the police just came and picked you up from work. There's a fire in your neighborhood. You can't go home. They're busing you to homes to stay at. So how are you feeling? What are you thinking about? What's the stuff you wish you had time that you wish you could go home and get? And for you guys, similar scenario. The police just knocked on your door in the middle of the night, and your neighborhood's on fire. You got to get out. They hand you a trash bag, and you have 5 minutes to put whatever you can in it and get out. So how are you feeling right now? What are you thinking about? What's going in your trash bag? So, fair enough? Okay, feel free to grab some pizza and then come back and go ahead and start discussing with kids. Did you both sign in?
We did.
Awesome. Are you guys, I think we need to do one on each line.
We did it wrong for all the other cores.
Oh, that's
mine.
I can take it if you want.
Sorry.
Until we're ready to get back on. When you come back in, or you just basically gonna, oh, you guys are gonna discuss it? Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. So that'll be like 5 minutes from now on.
Yeah.
Sorry. I need to take you out.
Oh, that's okay. No worries. Awesome, thanks.
Maybe if you don't mind, when they come back in too, if you could ask everyone to make sure to sign
Yes.
right now. And then right before you do that too, I'm gonna make sure this camera's on so I can get it.
Okay, before discussions. Did everyone get a handout? Everyone got a handout? Okay.
You know, I finish at the gym and I'm like, oh, I can't eat pizza when I get here and I'm not ready to eat
It's not hard to find good pizza in Colorado Springs. I'm surprised.
Really? I feel like
Marco's.
Marco's is, yeah, that's kind of our go-to at this point. Oh, I have a New York style place that's right outside my house that doesn't deliver. It's for eat in or pick up, but it's really good. But you know, when it doesn't deliver, you're like, but I don't. I mean, I have to look at people.
Yeah. No, I gotta say, Dion's at Dublin and Powers, they're like the best.
See, I never been there.
Again, they don't deliver, but if you go through like a third-party food app, you can kind of get it.
Okay. Yeah.
They're the
See, of
best.
course, I live in Central, so Colorado doesn't go that far for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you guys want lots of pizza before?
I wanted to.
I've heard about it.
Yeah.
I thought I recognized you. I'm at 21 now, but yeah. Yeah.
I remember how it's because
21C. Yeah, it is really big. I never like venture outside of children, so it still feels small to me.
I volunteer for a cat rescue that's at
That's
Wild Live.
There's some more toys.
And then that's why I'm not. Maryland.
Always have to find even outdoor ones.
You know,
Maybe?
I don't care about Florida. I'm just
Right.
So I know my stuff.
Are we supposed to write in here?
There's more personal stuff.
You can just discuss and then we'll share together as a group. So how are you feeling and what are you thinking?
How are you feeling?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Gotta get my animals.
So like if you found out that your house was on fire and you couldn't go back and you were just going to someone else's, what would your be feeling?
Gotta
What would
get them out because they
wish
belong to
you'd
the
gotten?
kids.
That kind of stuff.
Except for Vinny.
I think it'd be weird to go like without like your personal stuff, like your clothes you usually wear to bed, like things like that. Like it seems really simple. You go to Target and pick some up, but it's not your usual routine. So like I want my own like Ed Sheeran T-shirt. That just makes me feel good. So
Yeah, and I know
We'll go to the dog park and he's doing good and I'll say go play and he'll jump around for like 2 minutes and be like,
you're shell
okay,
shocked. You're like,
I just stand next to
you
you.
know, we send people $500. I'm like, here's $5,000. I'm like, here's $5,000. Do what you gotta do.
right, and where do you even start? Like that's crazy.
Like buy some clothes, you know.
It's funny
But like it's like I
because
need a mattress,
mental
you know, kind of, you know, something like
snapshot.
that you don't really think about.
Well, and I think like you said, kind of the heirlooms, but even just stuff that you don't really think is that important.
Yeah.
But like you know, my little sister brought me from Italy, like just this little thing that has memories attached to it.
Yeah.
pictures.
I would say like important documents, like at home we have like all our passports and social
Yeah.
You know, with my, I
have a bit of
when they don't get you have to practice
All of
non-attachment.
that too. It's like,
I would hope that my family saved and my
yeah, it's the mental game now.
And then obviously we have one folder that's like our go-to that we have to have. I'll tell you what, passports and, I don't know, green card, you know, this stuff would be incredibly hard to
Get rid of
get everything else, maybe I feel like, you know, give me
I was in Europe.
I try to not keep too much anyways.
And I got a phone call saying.
And I get very open and very.
Did you look at at the time? I hope my cat was okay. You know, I hope my cat was able to get out.
Would be my dog.
Yeah.
You don't get the news.
You know, I have my fur baby.
They're like, "It's on fire. You guys
It would be devastating. But
So
then
I
practice
practiced
with
and I said,
our
to go
older
to the
dog.
garage.
All right, guys, let's take 2 more minutes and then we'll come back.
In case of a fire, what's the first thing you do? She says, get my dog. No.
We'll get the dogs. You get out.
Because they eat.
But at least you understand.
It's not staying black forest. It didn't really
That's what
take
you
hours
like
and
too. You want to get your kids and your dogs and.
I gotta say, my makeup bag is worth probably $200. So I'm taking that with me.
There's a lot of times it's easy to carry.
Yeah.
All my pictures.
But depending on your insurance, your makeup coverage.
No, but I don't have to go out and buy it.
Other question, how would I feel about everything burned down? It really depends on circumstances, what the insurance cover. That's got our biggest loss.
If you have USA,
Do?
okay, I work for USA Property, I never tell you. But no,
It may survive the fire, but then it may not survive
it's
the
hard, and
winter.
it's, USAA with the total loss, what do you pay out your
I
policy?
probably do the same.
I think it's kind of weird because it's like you don't have any place to go anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
You can't be like, oh, I'm going home. It's
Live in a hotel.
like, right? It's like, what do I do?
And of course, we get a new home.
Nobody grab the kids.
Start over, if you will.
Yeah.
No, no.
Well, we do
All right, guys, if you're ready, we'll start to get back together and discuss a little. And just as a reminder, people could turn their phones on silent because we are videoing. Thank you. All right. Good to go.
Okay, whenever you're ready.
Okay, all right. So for you guys over here, so you're got picked up from work, right? No chance to go home. So tell me a little bit about how are you feeling right now? What's that stuff you're thinking about at home that you wish you had time to go back for? Just what's your overall sense of what's going on?
He said one thing might be like the feeling wise is you don't have anywhere to go now. Like you can't be like, oh, I'm going back home. It's like now, where is home kind of
You feel
thing.
very displaced?
Yeah.
What else?
You know, are the animals okay? Are the, you know, are the livelihood of the things you love? Knickknacks, you know, for me, it's stuff you can't replace, like sentimental items.
Yeah. Yep. Anything else? Nice.
For me, it would just be like the important documents that are hard to replace, like your birth certificate, social security cards, passports. Everything else is I could replace. You know, animals,
Yeah.
dogs,
Yep.
pets, stuff like that.
Okay. All right. Anything else? Good. Okay, what about you guys? So you guys were picked up from work, no, home.
We're home.
You're picked up from home in the middle of the night, and you have 5 minutes in the trash bag. So how are you feeling, and what did you put in that trash bag?
She's gonna speak for us.
Okay, go for it.
She covered animals, important papers, pictures.
Okay.
We all agree. We got some pajamas
That's
on.
that stuff, right. And how are you, what's your state of mind being woken up in the middle of the night and given 5 minutes to like grab important things and get out of there?
Frantic.
Yeah.
You know, being from Colorado Springs and what we went through in the last 10 years, we're prepared. Most of us
Yeah.
have thought
Things are
about
already
it.
in place.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, and last month I had several people in the class who did lose their home so, in Waldo, so this was a real life scenario. So we're feeling panicked, we're feeling anxious, frazzled. are we prepared? Are we not prepared? What are we sticking in the trash bag? I'm scared, unknown. Where are they taking me? So obviously, these are scenarios that are right. Not a big shocker there. Sometimes kids are picked up from school and they don't have an opportunity to go home or to get anything. And so they might be thinking about their cat. You know, they might be thinking about the stuffed animal they didn't have a chance to grab, those things that are important to them. Depending on the situation, they might be thinking about their sibling who might be going to the same place or to a different place. You know, and for you guys, this would be a scenario where kids are picked up from home with 5 minutes to get out of there because of whatever the situation might be. And it's not abnormal for kids to show up in a foster care placement with nothing but a trash bag full of a couple possessions. And we're adults, right? We have different coping mechanisms to be able to handle situations like this. But you imagine how, you know, a 4-year-old, a 10-year-old, a 13-year-old is feeling in either one of those situations. You know, are they super excited to enter your home? You know, are they feeling for this new house and these new, you know, temporary parents and this new situation? You know, these kids are coming in with some trepidation. They don't know you. They don't know why you're opening your home to them. They're still coping with all the things that they're kind of going through. Their whole world just got flipped upside down. So I think it's important for us to remember that we can't expect, you know, thanks and excitement from these kids because they're in survival mode, right? And so we have to be really sympathetic to their situation, especially when they first come into our home. So I want to show you guys a video. It's about 25 minutes, and then we'll take a short break and jump into some discussion. Okay.
Everything that's important about life as a human being, you learn in context of relationships. We need somebody that we can trust, that we can hold on to, who walks with us hand in hand through the whole deal.
Brain research gives us the new lens in which to begin to look at children's behavior and the meaning of their behavior in a completely different way.
They found that if you took a little rat pup and you held it, a human being held it for a very brief period of time, which was stressful to the rat, and put the rat pup back in the litter with the mother, let the rat grow up, and then looked at its brain, it was different than animals that hadn't been handled.
Early in life, many of these connections in the brain, what are called synapses, develop based on genetics, but also based on how experiences occur. And then throughout childhood, the changes in the brain that occur in an interaction between genes and the experiences kids have.
The research on the brain has for the first time given us biological, physical proof that interactional processes that don't go well, for example, impacts the brain profoundly.
If the brainstem, for whatever reason, has some insult during development, it could be alcohol exposure in utero, it could be cigarette smoking, it could be daily exposure to drug, or it could be significant distress in the caregiver. For whatever reason, if the brainstem is poorly organized and overreactive and dysynchronous, the baby's born, and very often they will have what we call a state regulation problem. They are hard to soothe, you can't quiet them down very well. It's hard to engage them, and it makes the caregivers feel overwhelmed. They can't calm the child down very well. The child stays all stirred up, and instead of having this smooth, synchronous interaction, you have kind of this bad fit.
When a pregnant mother is under constant stress, she might just be stressed at the office, but her brain and her body and her developing baby's brain don't know the difference between that and there are predators in the environment. So we're seeing babies being born that are hyperreactive. Why? Mom's under stress during her whole pregnancy, either through work or through being unsupported by her community, by her partner, by her family, whatever. So we have this baby born that's already hyperreactive.
The attachment bond between the parent and the child is really the carrier of all development, and the regulation that a mother provides, the soothing that the mother gives to the baby, the calming of the baby's nervous system. If she can do that well, the baby's nervous system will learn how to regulate itself. If she cannot do that, if she herself is all unregulated, if she is sick, if she is in marital discord, if she's depressed, she cannot attend adequately to her baby to where the baby feels like there's somebody there watching out for him or her, then the baby goes into these heightened states of hyperarousal and dysregulation, and the body, the template of that, is being set.
Attachment relationships where the parent is sensitive to the child's inner state lead the child to have a brain that becomes very integrated and a mind that is very coherent.
What our bodies want for best development is relationship. Every neuron in our brain develops most optimally through a loving relationship.
The most important pivotal experience in a child's life is that a caregiver and a child have a falling in love experience. And that experience of joy is invigorating to the body on all fronts, and is essential to being able to develop the capacity to care, to be able to develop the capacity to love, and to have empathy for other human beings, and to be able to have moral conscience.
Relationships are the absolute heart of humanity, and we are neurobiologically designed to be in relationships. We are neurobiologically designed to be able to read and respond to other people, and we're neurobiologically designed to reach out and seek relationships with other people. And when we have these opportunities to form healthy relationships with family, with neighbors, with coworkers, with members of the community, we're healthy. And when we don't have those opportunities, we literally are physiologically at risk.
Children, infants are not soothed, repeatedly not soothed by their parents when they're in distress. That impacts one of the chemical systems in the brain, what's called the cortisol system. And cortisol is a natural neurohormone for calming arousal down, calming distress down. And if an infant's not soothed, then they increase their cortisol levels to try to make up for the lack of soothing by the parents, self-soothing. And then because high levels of cortisol are dangerous to brain tissue, it resets the thermostat. And then as a result of that, through the rest of their life until recently, we thought it was permanent, the thermostat is set so that they have less cortisol and less capability of handling distress. So they're more prone to getting upset, more prone to staying upset once they get upset.
If parents are not providing sensitive caregiving, where they're not tuned into the internal state of the child, then you have various kinds of difficulties that can arise.
Developmental trauma, including neglect, has as high an impact over the lifespan as a single incident trauma?
Developmental trauma or ambient trauma is trauma that's just everyday life. It's in the neighborhood, it's in the household.
It is at times very confusing to the adult world the way children respond to traumatic events, and it's very easy for adults to dismiss the profound impact that a traumatic event can have on a child, because very often they will do most things pretty well.
There's a strong sense that children are there to manipulate us and to be willfully disobedient. And instead of really understanding the child from the child's point of view, I think we've imposed something from the outside, almost adult characteristics onto children.
One of the single most important understandings that parents can have is to realize that trauma creates fear in children, and anger has an underlying element of fear. And so instead of focusing just on the anger, we can address the fear in children and calm and soothe the fear that will make the anger go away, rather than just focusing on the anger.
Children who've experienced some type of trauma often have symptoms of ADD.
These difficult behaviors are really stress responses, and it's up to us to figure out what is causing these stress responses. And there's several different pathways that they can show us that they're distressed. The first stress response is a hypersensitive, hyperreactive stress response. And these infants cry a lot, are inconsolable. When they become toddlers, they may go into rapid temper tantrums and be very volatile. A second stress response are infants who are hypervigilant. These infants will have very wide eyes and will be very vigilantly looking, and you can see that there's an anxiety in their muscle tone and in how they carry themselves, and that they're scanning the environment. A toddler may be overly clingy or overly withdrawn. A third stress response would be very shut down and tuned out. These children, again, may be misunderstood as a good, easy baby.
There are equal number of children who are too good, too quiet, withdrawn, who demonstrate the cool side, the shutdown, the frozen side of trauma. Most teachers, most educators at this point still don't recognize those kids, and they often become as problematic or more problematic than the more obviously upset kid.
You can't always tell when a child has been traumatized. Very often they may be going through the day interacting normally with their peers. They'll be playing games, they might be laughing, and you may not have any idea that that child the week before lost their parent in a violent event. However, if you follow that child long enough, what you'll find is that under the smallest challenge, they'll unravel and they'll unwind. And it's not always predictable. They may handle one situation very well and then completely collapse in something that seems pretty minor.
When an attachment figure is the source of terror, the child's brain has two processes going on at once. One is the inborn attachment system, which says, I'm in a state of alarm, I need to go to my attachment figure for soothing. But if that attachment figure is the source of the distress, and I don't just mean being upset and get ice cream before dinner, I mean terror, then what happens is the child will then try another track in the child's brain will say, do not go toward that figure, that's the cause of your distress.
Parents are unaware of how that they can traumatize their infants or their toddlers, and then they're unaware of what their children's signals mean.
People who are traumatized are stressed, and the stress doesn't go away. The symptoms don't go away. They persist in one way or another, either as a psychological problem or as a learning problem or as perhaps a physical problem in the body. For years and years and years, they never disappear. They come, they go, but they're always back again. That's trauma. That's stress at the level of trauma.
98% of parents who have children who have been traumatized have also been traumatized themselves. So healing the parent's trauma first allows them to create an environment for the healing of their child's trauma.
if you really want to understand how a child is functioning in the present, you need to understand their personal history. Because the brain, more than anything, is an historical organ. It stores experiences. So if you understand the personal experiences of the child, you will understand a lot about how different systems in the brain organize.
We look at the whole person, we look at their whole history, and we look at their development. We look at what's happened in their body, in their life, in their social structure. We look at all the aspects of their life, and then we determine where to go from there.
One of the most important factors in a good developmental history is getting some understanding and some insights about the child-rearing beliefs and practices of their caregiver, which you can usually get by asking them about their family and the way they were raised.
We have to work with parents who can feel good enough about themselves so that they can allow their children to feel good enough, and there won't be the kind of abuse.
It is essential to treat the entire family when healing trauma in children. Without healing the trauma of the family and creating awareness for the family, you can't help the child.
It's a parent's own self-understanding that is so crucial for the quality of the relationship with the child. Trauma is like a dog bite, in the sense of when a dog bites you on the fingers, your natural instinct is to pull your fingers away, and unfortunately that will create more damage to your skin. What really you need to do if a dog bites you in the hand is thrust your hand into the dog's mouth, which makes the dog gag. Now, I know it's very graphic, but it's the same thing with trauma. Parents need to know it's important to go into the trauma, into the mouth of the trauma with your mind and with the relationship, so that it doesn't dig its teeth in and yank the flesh of your soul away.
First of all, we have to get our children and our infants back into a condition of safety. That may be that they need contact with a safe relationship, that maybe they have had a disruption and they need to maybe not go to school that day and spend time with mommy, and maybe mommy needs to not go to work and just spend time with her child. So they need to get to regain a sense of safety if in fact that has been their baseline. One of the ways we help infants and children regain a sense of safety is to start to become what I call a sensory detective. We need to start becoming really aware of what sensations are reminders of that traumatic event, and they could be sounds, they could be tastes, they could be something visual, they could be a particular movement, a particular touch, and we're going to reintroduce a sensation that has been very traumatic or that triggers a traumatic memory. We want to be very clear that we give the right dose that the child or infant can handle. So it's going to have to be very small increments of helping them be able to experience that sensation, recover from that sensation, get back into safety, and then slowly go back and forth between a sense of fear, feeling out of control, and then being able to get back in control and safety. And the fourth is to increase the child's surround of sensory comfort, so that beyond the caregiver, there can be many arenas of sensory comfort that the child or infant can surround themselves with, whether it's music or a particular touch of a blanket or a particular toy that they hold that they feel safe with.
The next phase, though, is to tell the story of the experience, to make a narrative of it, so that other parts of the mind, the brain, if you will, left hemisphere, can join in the process of making sense. It also involves the verbal aspect of the creation of a story, from before the trauma happened, what happened at the time the trauma began, what were the elements of the experience of the trauma, what was the most frightening part, how did the trauma resolve,
what surprised them, what they didn't expect, what their body felt like, what it felt like in their body, what it felt like in their emotions. Can they tell us what those emotions are? Can they get pictures and put together the story?
What the narrative experience tells us is that what's shareable is bearable. And so when a person can bring it out and share it with another, then it becomes more bearable than keeping it to yourself.
A lot of
The trauma that has happened to children happened before they were verbal. There's no way we're going to work with that verbally. We have to get into their senses.
With infants and young children who are pre-verbal, there is still a way that parents can communicate to the child that they are understanding their child's distress and the importance of that. And they can communicate the story and the narrative of understanding, I understand what happened to you, even though the child may not completely understand the language of it. They will understand the tone of voice, they will understand the rhythm and the way in which that's communicated.
Half of our brains, our right half, can only speak the language of the nonverbal. And the nonverbal includes eye contact, then there's facial expression, tone of voice, posture, gestures, and timing and intensity of response. Those nonverbal signals can be taught to parents, and they can use them to understand what's going on with other people, and especially what's going on with young children.
Childhood trauma changes the biology of the brain. Well, early childhood support also changes the biology of the brain.
What studies of resilience show that even when children have insecure attachments in the home, if they've had at least one secure attachment with a daycare provider, a preschool teacher, or another adult in their lives, then that makes a huge difference for them having the seed of resilience. They may still have difficulties, but because they've had that one secure relationship, that relationship where they felt that another individual, another adult knows them and feels what's going on inside them, those kids have the potential to do very well in the future.
We can see imaging today of before and after trauma and see what happens in the brain, and we can also see repair that happens in the brain when our interventions have been successful.
What makes children get better following a trauma is connection to other human beings. Human beings who are present, who are patient, who are kind, who are sensitive, and they don't need to be necessarily psychologically insightful. They don't need to know anything about trauma. All they need to know is that they're right there with this child, they're trying to be comforting, they're trying to be supportive, they're trying to encourage. Those kinds of interactions end up being much more therapeutic and healing than many of the other things that we try to do with kids.
Teachers can look more at their children, be more emotionally present for children, touch them, work on their own nervous system and their own regulation. If they're angry and they're out of control in terms of what's going on inside of themselves, the message that they're going to convey to the child is, I'm angry and I don't like you.
If you're an adult and there are children in your life, whether you're in law enforcement, a teacher, a parent, a foster parent, whatever you are, and you know that a child has been exposed to something that's potentially traumatic, the first thing that you should be aware of is that not all traumatic events lead to disastrous mental health outcomes. In fact, the vast majority of children that are traumatized actually do pretty well. But they do need your attention, they do need your kind support, and they do need your awareness about what are warning signs that would tell you to actually take the next step and try to get some professional help.
It's up to us. We can't wait for a day to do this spreading of the message that we can do something about it, that children, especially young children, have the most possibility for health and plasticity, for overcoming these early traumas if we as a community, a large community, support them.
We have permission now to meet children's needs. We have permission now from neuroscience to give children what they need, and to me that is so exciting.
If there was one place I would like to start with individuals as well as our society trying to make a difference, to really stop the cross-generational passage of trauma and of insecure attachment, it would be for parents to start a process of self-understanding. It basically costs nothing except the time and emotion that it takes for parents to begin on that process. And we all can do it. And the people who benefit most, besides ourselves, are our children.
We're spending literally 95% of our public dollars to change the brain, because that's what mental health is. That's what public education is. That's what juvenile justice intervention is. All of these are trying to change the brain, and we're spending almost nothing in the first 5 years of life when the brain is easiest to modify, and it takes the least amount of professional input, the least amount of insight. It takes just high-quality caregiving.
It's us, not they. It's each one of us doing it now, not later. But
so we will take a short break. I know you want to keep listening to this awesome music. I don't know when this video is anymore. That music is great. Okay, so we'll take a, let's see, what time is it? We'll do 5 minutes, bathrooms, pizza, water, stretch your legs, and then we'll get going on our worksheets.
Hey there.
Sorry.
How long have you guys been together? You mean my husband and I? Yeah. Oh, goodness. 9 years. Oh. Yeah, the rest of ours. Okay, that's great.
Turn the mic back on.
Oh, you did turn it on?
I just started on,
Okay.
I feel like a weird takeaway I got from that video is how can you not be stressed when you're pregnant? I feel like I'd be stressed that I was stressed.
Right? Well, I think there's a...
I think that have more to do with society than it does.
Is that, I think part of it is that balance of just like normal stressors of life or nerves of, oh my gosh, I'm going to have a baby, that kind of stuff. And then there's really heightened stressors of, I'm in an abusive relationship, I'm working 80 hours a week, right? There's crank it up a notch. I think that is, because everyone's going to have some measure of stress when they're pregnant, right? Just because you're growing a human being. But I think they're referring to more of the extreme levels of stress. Somebody who is just not in a good place to have a kid and trying to figure out what they're going to do.
Yeah.
So, portion where you'll be talking, or you having the crowd speak, if you would mind just letting me know, and then I'll turn that back on.
Okay.
That camera there.
Sure. I think occasionally I'll ask some questions but we'll talk for a little bit first, going through the worksheet.
Yeah, even if you're about to just kind of preface it and just say, okay, now I'm going to ask some questions to the audience here, you know, and then give me a second to, that way I don't sprint.
Run up here and knock the camera down?
Yeah. Might look up and, you know, trip over my shoes or something, flying across.
Yeah. So where are you guys at in the process?
Second week for me.
You're what?
This is the second training for me. So I had, I guess, core 2 yesterday, last week, and I'll have core 2, and then I'll come back for core 1.
Okay. And then you'll be ready for home study, or do you have?
I don't know. So I just talked to Bree today, and I have to kind of go and do all like the online stuff, and then she didn't address home study and the positive, the Saturday class, when that was going to be or anything like that. I know the CPR class is on Saturday, the 3rd Saturday. I can't come this Saturday, so I'll go to the next month's. So
lots of paperwork.
Lots of paperwork.
More paperwork. And
have to go to
more classes.
Go have a physical done. Which I was like, oh, physical, okay, makes sense logically, but like, okay.
What about you?
I was in the previous cohort. I'm just making up this week. So I've done some of the extra parenting stuff. And I think Bree said when they meet on Wednesday, I might be getting my home study person. So.
Okay. Awesome. So this is your last class?
Last core class, yeah.
Okay.
I know Bree's like, so are you ready? I'm like, I mean, I thought I was, but now that you're asking me.
Short term, right?
I'm sorry?
You're doing respite care and short term?
Yes.
Awesome. Very good.
And one of us is going to get girls, just girls.
Hey, girls.
I have 3 boys at home. And
you're ready for the girl in the home?
Yeah. I've taken in a few strays, but I don't know. They always bring it around to boys. Like after I said, no boy animals in this house, 3 dogs, all boys.
Of course.
And I said, when I protest too much, God gets me back.
She was breathe for today. Still have paperwork for her.
If I don't know if she's still here or not, if you need to leave some things here, you can leave them with me and I can put them on our desk.
We have to be doing some copies. No, you don't have to check. Can you make some lines?
Yep, we can do that after.
Mine's so weird. It was one of those like waterfall ones, but the water leaked out. And I was like,
Okay, guys, we'll go ahead and get started. Great. Okay, so everybody get one of the worksheets. So like I mentioned before, you do get to keep these, so you can feel free to take whatever notes on them that you wish. So we're just going to I'm going to run through these answers. Some of them we'll chat a little bit, and if you ever have any questions or thoughts, feel free to interrupt. I'm definitely cool with us being an interactive class. So, all right, so we'll get started with number 1. So everybody has 3 innate needs, and the first one is security. We all have the need to experience both physical and emotional security. The second is for significance. This is a sense of being wanted, special, unique, important. And then the third one is strength. And this is the ability to get our needs met. So these are crucial for us, and these are crucial for these kids. We all need to experience security, significance, and strength. Do you think that kids coming into foster care are necessarily feeling any of these things? Mm-hmm. Right, so it's another important thing to kind of have in mind. All right, so number 2 is nature wires the brain for learning. Nurturing is what the brain needs to develop. So number 2 is nurturing. I know lots of people have heard stories about babies in orphanages, in third world countries. I personally have visited orphanages in Africa and Russia, and there's nothing more eerie than walking into a room full of a bunch of babies and it's silent, right? Because eventually, if they express a need and it's not met, then eventually you stop expressing that need, right? So you have a lot of these babies who maybe they have caregivers who care about them, but there's one caregiver and 30 babies, so they're going to end up propping a bottle up against a pillow, and even though that child is fed and they are not getting that nurture, that eye contact, that being held, and that actually severely impacts their brain development. Oftentimes these babies will end up having failure to thrive. There was a study done that showed a third of the babies in orphanages ended up dying, and half of the surviving ones ended up with mental illness. And this was all just because of a lack of nurture. So that goes to show a little bit about how important nurture is in brain development and just in life in general. Number 3 is food and clothing without a critical amount of socialization predisposes an infant to death. And that's what we were just talking about. We can have our physical needs met, but if we're not just physical beings, right? We also have emotional needs, and if those needs aren't being met, then infants can actually die without it. Anybody know who the father of attachment is? Nobody's ever known. John Bowlby, B-O-L-B-Y. If you ever want to look into some more stuff on attachment on your own, psychology world, John Bowlby is a great guy to look into. All right, number 5. The primary goal in the first year of life is to develop secure attachment with the caregiver. Secure attachment. So when you have kids coming into your home, whether they're going to be there for a day or a year or anything in between, that's one of your chief objectives, is to build an attachment relationship, build a bond, build a trust, because even if they don't stay with you permanently, that's just setting them up for success. Like they mentioned in the video, high quality caregiving can do a tremendous amount of healing for kids who have undergone trauma. So that's a really, really big deal. Can't be overemphasized. Number 6, attachment theory in a nutshell. Every infant, or you could say any kid, needs someone who's crazy about him or her. Every kid needs someone who's crazy about them, whether that be, a teacher, or in your case, a foster parent, just for them to know that somebody thinks greatly of them is a huge game changer. All right, and number 7, healthy attachment is the springboard or foundation for all other development. So again, healthy attachment is the springboard for all other development. That's why we need it as early as possible. Number 8, attachment is said to be a fancy word for trust. When you're attached to somebody, you trust them, they trust you. Part of that attachment. All right, so number 9 we'll break down a little bit. So how is attachment formed? That's what we're here to figure out tonight. So A is you need consistent. I'll give these to you and then we'll talk about each one. So consistent, prompt, nurturing, responsiveness over time. Attachment is formed by consistent, prompt, nurturing, responsiveness over time. So consistent, what's that? That's talking about, kid expresses a need at 2 p.m., you meet the need. Kid expresses a need at 2 a.m., you meet the need. You have to develop this consistent relationship where the kid knows, and they might test you for a little while because that's their job. Their job is to test and your job is to prove you can handle it. So, baby cries at 1 a.m., go to the baby. Baby cries at 4 a.m., go to the baby. In these scenarios, they don't need somebody who's going to force them to stop expressing their need, right? We're trying to break that. I think oftentimes parenting kids from trauma will feel counterintuitive right? Because society tells us we need to back off so that they learn how to take care of themselves. But these kids have already experienced a failure in whoever is supposed to be taking care of them. So what they need is somebody to prove that it is okay to lean on somebody, that they can trust an adult, and then eventually that actually helps them be able to trust themselves. So being consistent in meeting the kids' needs, going to them when they express a need, and then prompt is that second one, and it's not, it's responding when the need is expressed and not delaying that, because when we can be consistent and prompt, that's when we're going to start to build a trust relationship. And then also nurturing is important, just because if we're coming at a kid in a tense, we're aggravated, they can pick up on that and their walls go up and they're not going to trust us as much. So we need to do what we need to do to take care of ourselves in order to meet their needs in a nurturing way. And then just being responsive to their needs. So consistent, prompt, nurturing responsiveness over time is, the foundational way for how we start to build attachment with these kids. Again, when they express a need and we meet the need, that just builds our trust relationship. Any questions about that? Feel free to interrupt whenever. Okay, and B is providing comfort in distress. Providing comfort in distress. So we all experience distress, maybe multiple times a day, maybe a few times a year, but we experience distress, and then what we need is comfort in order to get to a state of calm, and then eventually the cycle repeats itself. We'll experience new distress, and we'll need comfort to get to a place of calm. So when our kiddos experience distress, and we can help them get to a place of comfort, then that moves them to calmness. And then when it happens again and we help comfort them, eventually what happens in this cycle is they start to learn how to calm themselves, right? So they need us to show them for as long as it takes to help them receive comfort before they can get to a point where they feel capable enough to self-soothe, to solve their own problems, to take care of these things. They need to rely on us first before they can, and that's how they learn how to rely on themselves. So, all right, number 10. Attachment trauma occurs when the person who is supposed to be the source of comfort becomes the source of distress. And they talked about that in the video too, how stressful it is to a kid when their body is telling them to go to, their parent or a teacher or somebody for comfort, and yet that's the person that's causing them distress. That can be very confusing to their brains. And then they have to try to figure out, well, who am I supposed to trust, right? So that's a major way that attachment trauma occurs, is when these kids, and a lot of kids in foster care have experienced that, the person they're going to for comfort is the person who's causing them distress. So just having somebody around to soothe is a big deal for kids, especially for infants. When infants are left screaming, they're not only are their brains getting the message that expressing your need doesn't, like nobody's hearing me, expressing your need doesn't work, but they're also burning precious calories, all sorts of stuff. So with all kids, especially with little ones, we need to go to them and soothe them, help them calm down when they're in distress. So, all right. Number 11. How distress is handled in infancy lays a neurological blueprint for how children respond to stress throughout life. So if babies are exposed to stress early on, their brain is kind of remapped. They have a lower threshold to deal with stress. So here's the deal. A lot of our kids are coming from trauma. So let's say a nice, healthy person, somebody who did not experience trauma, great upbringing, we might have this threshold that's way up here, and maybe we start our day here, and a lot of stuff has to happen before we get to that point of I've had it, I've reached my limit, I've blown my top. But kids or anybody who's experienced trauma, their threshold is lower. So they might wake up right here And they start here every day. And when they go to the kitchen and their favorite cereal is gone, boom, they're already there. And so what we see is somebody throwing a temper tantrum because the Cheerios are gone. Like, that seems a little excessive, right? We need to shut that down. We need to end that behavior. But when we have to back up and realize what might be really happening here is that they are already at their threshold, right? So when in doubt, we need to err on the, again, some of this feels counterintuitive, but this is specific to kids from trauma, that when in doubt, we need to err on the side of extra nurture in order to bring that threshold back down. Does that make sense? We just kind of have to, there's less space there for them to be able to deal with stressors. Any questions about that? No? All right, are we on number 12? Okay. Attachment healing occurs in the context of loving, nurturing relationships. So attachment healing occurs in the context of loving, nurturing relationships. I think another thing that's really good to remind ourselves of, going back to that blueprint, is that when we're talking about kids who've come from trauma, we're not just talking about kids who witnessed trauma or experienced a trauma that they can remember, because some of our kids who are little might not physically remember their trauma. So when I mentioned that I have 4 children, and my oldest 2, my husband and I adopted when they were 6 and 2 years old. And so my daughter has memories of life before us because she was 6 and a half. My son has no memories of life before us because he was only 2, but he still carries trauma from stuff that he doesn't remember. So, and even people who are taking home babies from the hospital, I think we have to remember that every single child who is not growing up with a biological parent has experienced trauma, period. Because something in their brain does not understand why the person whose body they grew in and voice they heard and smells and all this kind of stuff, why they're not going home with the hospital from that person. And it doesn't matter. I mean, even if it's like the best decision for the child, even if it's an adoption situation where you have a birth mother who is very selflessly making a painful choice to bless her child, that child is still experiencing trauma because there is a separation there. So even if they don't remember it, so that's why all the kids who come through foster care have experienced trauma, even if they weren't hit, you know, even if they didn't experience stuff like that, even if you're taking a baby home from a hospital, they've all experienced trauma because there's a separation there from that biological relative. So I think we can't ignore that, especially when we're dealing with babies and we think, oh, well, they don't know any better. They won't remember this. There's still a disconnect in the brain. There's still something happening there. So, okay, 13?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go for it.
It seems like there's some line in there that's probably very nebulous as to when you go from nurturing to sort of enabling or overindulging. I don't even know what the right word is, but
sure.
like I don't know.
Yeah,
exactly
where do you draw that line of making sure you're building a trusting relationship but not going so far that they're going to be manipulative or...
Right. You just give them permission because there's always an excuse as to why something happens, and I don't know how you discern what that line is. Or...
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's one of the reasons why I definitely mention to people that sometimes parenting trauma kids can feel counterintuitive, right? Because there is something different there. So I have an example I always share with the classes. So like I talked about my older 2 children. So, and this fits in perfectly with your question. So when my son was 3, again, he'd only been with me for a year, and I had just had a baby, and I'm in the grocery store, right? The best, like most favorite thing from any mom who has a toddler and an infant is to go to the grocery store. And I'm thinking, like, I'm on a mission, you know, my mother-in-law's flying in that day, I have, like, plans, I have food I need, I have recipes, I have all this stuff, and my 3-year-old son is throwing a massive fit, like, an epic fit. Like a woman gave me a gift card. It was so bad. It was bad. And you know why he was throwing a fit was because he wanted a candy bar. And I was going home to make dinner, and in my mind, I'm like, you don't need a candy bar right now. Or I don't even remember all the details. I think I was traumatized and I blocked it out. But he wanted a candy bar. I said no to the candy bar. He threw this massive, humiliating fit in the grocery store. So what and here's the deal. I felt like I was being a really good mom because I was suffering the humiliation in order to not give in to my kid, because if I did, then every time I go to the grocery store, he's going to throw a fit until he gets a candy bar. So I really felt like in that situation, I was being a really good mom by not giving in to his screams. So I can look back on that situation now, and I can tell you a completely different story of what was actually happening. So we're in the grocery store. And because my kid is 3 and he's not a grown adult who knows my plan and my agenda, what he sees is that for the last hour, Mom just took whatever she wanted off the shelf. I just went up every aisle and I'm like, I want this, I want this, I want this. He doesn't know I have a plan, you know. He's just thinking, I just watched you for an hour, take whatever you want. And now I'm telling you what I need, and it's that Snickers bar. And in the mind of a 3-year-old, maybe a candy bar is a need. I'm hungry, that looks good, that's what I need. So what I did in that moment, and again, he had only been with me for probably less than a year at that point, so we were still building our trust relationship. So in his mind, he just watched me take whatever I want. He expressed his need to me. I said no to his need and did nothing to, soothe him, because I was just trying to pay and get out of there because I was being publicly humiliated. And does that make sense? So in my son's mind, that experience in the grocery store was a break in our relationship, because that was me proving to him he can't trust me. Sorry, what he was getting out of that situation is he cannot trust me to take care of his needs, because he expressed a need and I shut it down. And this is very specific to the place in our relationship that we were at. Now, fast forward to today. Well, first let me tell you, if I could go back in time, I would give him the candy bar. I would give him 3 candy bars. I would just, in order to, not just to shut down the tantrum, but if I could stop and see what was happening in that moment, that he was just trying to express a need to me. I call these the perceived needs, because I don't think it's actually a need, but to him it's a need. And so if I could go back in time, I'd give him the candy bar, because that would communicate to him, because we're still building our bond, our trust relationship. You're expressing a need to me, I'm going to meet that need. Now, fast forward to today, and my son is 9. If he threw a fit in a grocery store, heck no, he's not getting a candy bar. Because we've been together for 8 years, and we have an established trust relationship now. He's my son. And so this is not a forever thing. I think there's a period of time when we are building a bond, when we're building a relationship, when they need to know that they can trust us, when they can express a need. And we're not necessarily, we don't have to always filter it through, well, is this really, truly a genuine need? We're building trust. They're expressing something, and we need to meet them there. And then eventually, as that bond and attachment and trust relationship gets stronger, then we can have those conversations of, son, I understand you want this candy bar, but here's what's going on, And at this time, I cannot buy you the candy bar, but let's make a deal about when we go home, and then, turn it into something else. Does that help?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, yeah. So it's also not in previous classes I had shared the story and said, I wish I would have just given him the candy bar. And then I didn't do the follow-up. And I had a guy ask me afterwards, like, well, do you just always give them the candy bar then for the rest of their life? And I'm like,
next time
I should have mentioned that. Yeah. I need a bike. I need a trip to Disneyland. Yeah. And eventually you get to that point in the relationship. But that's what I'm saying. When you're dealing with trauma kids, especially when you're trying to build that relationship, you err on the side of extra nurture. because they've been through so much and their brains have been through so much that they need some childlike nurture to get them back to the place that they should be at in a healthy developmental.
So going back to number 5 on the first page, it says the primary goal in the first year of life is to develop a secure attachment. It seems to me maybe that's the first year of the relationship, maybe more than just the first year of life.
Yeah, I
it's
think
more
so.
important to develop the relationship than set up the rules. And I know Ross has talked about that. Like, you're not. It's not about rule setting. It's about relationship.
Right. Absolutely, because all that stuff will be so much easier if you have the relationship. So the primary objective with all of this, when a kid comes into your home, is relationship building and bonding and attaching before we can get to any of that other stuff, because they don't know you and they're not going to listen to your rules. I mean, it depends on their personality. Some kids are find more safety and are just more natural rule followers, and that's, you know, that's fine, but they need to develop that relationship before you become someone different than just Joe Schmo off the street who, you know, like I said, if I think there is a primal wound in every kid who is not growing up with a biological parent. And again, they can have wonderful, successful lives, but when kids come into your home, they, whether they realize they're thinking it or not, if they're thinking the people who were biologically hardwired to take care of me for whatever reason couldn't do that, so why the heck should I trust you to do it? You know? They don't know that you have a good heart, that you're doing this because you care and you want to, you know, help kids in the community. Their first line of defense is, you know, who are you and why should I trust you? Adults have let me down. You know, how will you be different? And so there's ground that has to be made up there in building that relationship. And like we said, their job is to test you and your job is to prove that you can handle it. And, you know, that's why we do this stuff. That's why we have support groups. That's why we have activities and functions and all that, because there is a place where we need to be able to come for support. You know, if you're having a great time or a hard time with a kid or with their case, then this is a safe place for you guys to come and talk about that kind of stuff, because we don't need to be, you know, talking about problems with biological family or the case or whatever with the kids, because they don't need more things to stress about. And it's hard to necessarily talk to people who are outside of the foster care world and don't necessarily get it. And so that's why we try to keep a close community here at Hope and Home, so that you guys have that support and that community to call up somebody from your support group or show up at support group and be like, this was what happened, something happened and it was so awesome, or this happened and it's super frustrating, because you guys have to take care of yourselves in order to take care of these kids, so that you can be strong if you do get to the point where they're pushing on the relationship to kind of test, can you handle them? Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so when we're on? Okay. So what are 3 things that we can do to promote attachment? All right, so A is meet the need under the behavior. So oftentimes it's not about we can't make it about the behavior. We have to look and see what's behind the behavior. So for example, you know, kid is pushing their brother around, knocking over a cereal bowl, kicking the dog, and you're thinking this is bad behavior, it needs to be disciplined. Well, hit the pause button. You know, what's behind the behavior? Well, when you root around a little bit, you figure out that they're trying to get in trouble because they don't want to go to school that day because their 3rd period teacher looks like their uncle who had sexually abused them. Like, there's stuff going on behind the behaviors. And oftentimes, it's usually rooted back, if you dig far enough, it's usually rooted back in fear. There's something going on. They need some sort of comfort. They need some sort of, you know, digging out, like you talked about, going into the trauma instead of pulling away from it. So taking time to not just lash out or try to discipline a behavior, but to pause and try to figure out what is behind the behavior, like what's causing the behavior. Does that make sense? Any questions about that? Yeah. And I've seen that. I've seen that a lot with my kids. That when my son thrives on structure and expectations, and when he's kind of being disrespectful or being rude or picking on his siblings, it's typically because he feels out of control and he needs me to stop and to get on his level and to look at him in the eyes and say, you know, what's going on? He needs to know the plan. Like, he just feels out of control. Let me tell you what the plan is for the day. Let me tell you what's going to happen next. What do you want to know about what's, you know, kind of give him that control back about his situation, and then he's able to behave better. And with that, B is avoid power struggles. I need that reminder sometimes. Nobody wins in a power struggle, because then it just becomes about who's going to fold first, you know, who's going to last longest. So try to avoid power struggles. And then C is catch them doing well. So find any excuse you can to catch them doing well. Hey, buddy, thank you so much for opening the door for the dog to get out when nobody else noticed that he needed to get out. You know, thank you so much for clearing off your plate, or that was so nice of you to read your sister a story. Catch them doing good, because they need that positive affirmation, and so the more they get it, the better. And that's also really great for relationship building. So stable relationships are really the key to building trust and healing for these kids. So, okay, I would love for you guys, we're going to do a little discussion, some more discussion, because I know you love hearing me talk, but I want to hear you talk too. So first I'll have you discuss a little bit with each other, and then we'll come back and talk a little in the big group. But I want some ideas for how we can build trust with the kids coming into our home. So yeah, I'll just leave it at that. Ideas for how we can build trust with foster kids in our home, how we can learn to trust them and how they can learn to trust us. So go ahead and split off into your two-ish groups and chat about that for a couple minutes, and then we'll come back and share.
I know.
I don't want to be in your She heard discussion and she's like, oh, gotta go.
I was thinking, like, back when we did this, like, my next day at work, like, what would my usual day look like? And one of the things would be, like, I know it's trivial, but, like, having makeup. And so I think if you get, like, a teenager in their house, and they get to bring anything, and their next day at school, and that's, like, a little thing you didn't necessarily even think about. So I wonder if even just asking them, hey, what does your normal day look like? And then trying to meet those needs, whether it's makeup or their favorite cereal or things like that, just so like their literal next day is able to be as normal as possible.
If you have time to get
Right. I've done all the rest of them, so I don't want to give you like spoilers for the stories. And there's a really good one about cereal. So.
No, yeah, and I think definitely, sitting down and depending on the age.
And then we'll come back and share with me.
Depending on the age, I guess, sitting down and kind of the similar thing, like, okay, so, what do you need? Like, is there anything that I can get you? Or is there anything that, like, I watched the video last week where, the daughter is staying up all night because she was watching out for her siblings, and because she wasn't safe. What makes you feel safe? Hey, do I need to? Like right now, I don't have lights in my house, and it's like, hey, do I need to? Just kind of, I think, kind of along the same lines. Just what makes you feel more comfortable? And then obviously, if they're little nonverbals, I'm probably not the right reaction, but probably just love on them.
What would I like to do is we like to play a lot and be silly together and make more memories. So it could be even easy stuff, like if you had a cotton ball and we all sit around the table and blow it back and forth just to kind of break the ice and make us look at each other. Yeah, we'll blow that cotton ball at you, and there's laughter, and I feel like through laughter it creates already a sense of community. And this is how I would start out and just,
I think art's probably a good way.
What's that?
Art is probably a good way. Like I bet if you kind of did it that way, you have to do everything with some paint and
right. Like we get markers, coloring books, sand coloring things or different things. Yeah, it could be anything, but I think it's just doing something together.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
So you guys have kids, right?
Yes.
You have kids at home? So you can include them in whatever those little activities are?
Oh, yeah. Most
Just do it
definitely.
like that.
So everybody can kind of get a sense for each other. But if I really would feel like that the kiddo that came from the outside and needs me more, then I would make arrangements for the other kids to be equally fun. Bless you. Maybe with somebody else, a friend, or, so we can really focus on the kiddo that needs us most. I think it's what you even do between your own kids, right? Yeah. When you sense that one child needs you more, and could even be the older one or less than you, but then you just draw your attention towards them and spend some one-on-one time so you can really hear them and see what's going on.
We were supposed to have a group meeting.
I'm sorry, my belly's upset. I think I've just not been eating good.
Yeah. But we were just talking about how to
they have good ideas over there.
Make we're the safe and
well, if we're talking in one group anyway,
yeah, right.
We can chat together. They're used to just repeating it all to me. So yeah, are we good, Michael? Are you okay with the camera?
Well, thanks for asking. Let me just set it real quick.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm trying to record for people who live in other counties and have to watch class instead of so.
Here, I have plenty of movies.
Okay, we'll let you
Okay, awesome. So yeah, talk to me about some ways that we can build trust. You guys can share what you were already sharing, and then we can get some more thoughts too. So what were you guys sharing about ways to build trust with our foster kids?
Well, I was saying that I would start with the trust by making already memories with them together in a sense of being silly and playful. Obviously, if they're not having that, then we can figure out something else. But maybe even with everybody involved, like blowing a cotton ball around the table, or where you look each other in the eye, or you say silly things, like something that already creates a sense of community, so they feel included. And she asked me if I would include my children, and I absolutely would, unless I feel like that child really needs just me or us or one of us, or we divide them. So it's, because I think it's what you even do with your own children if you sense that one really needs you more. But yeah, definitely being playful and playing games or something like that, get to know each other.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It seems like it'd be very age and gender, or could be very age and gender dependent.
Sure.
As to what you do. Like you probably wouldn't blow a cotton ball around with a 13-year-old.
You could very well, if the kid never experienced that silliness, and it was so serious, and it was the caregiver for
even
siblings.
they think it's dumb and silly.
Right, I like to do that still,
Well, like you mentioned before with that, with the age of a kid and how that first year is very important. Sometimes when kids are in a new home, and maybe if they've been deprived in their earlier years, sometimes don't treat a 13-year-old like a 2-year-old, but there may be times when developmentally, like, they need different stimulation. So my 6-year-old, when she came home, there were times she actually was fine with me kind of jokingly holding her like a baby, because she was my baby. Like, I was becoming a mom for the first time, and my baby happened to be 6, but we were building that connection, and I didn't get to hold her when she was a baby, and so sometimes she would let me do that as a 6-year-old. So there may be times when a 13-year-old would let you blow a cotton ball, and there may be times when they'd be like, well, this is dumb, I'm not doing that. But yeah, absolutely, they might pretend like it's dumb and then actually think, oh.
I know a friend of mine, she adopted 3 kiddos out of foster care, like siblings, and the youngest one at the time was 4. But I remember her carrying her in a carrier that actually she could fit in to get that heartbeat and that bonding, because it was really crucial for their first year. And think that's very important. Although a 4-year-old usually walks and you don't carry them really.
And just being responsive to what they're okay with,
Right.
if they're okay with it.
Strap
and they
you
want
on no
the
matter
extra-
what.
Yeah, you'll get in that carrier. But if they're okay with that, kind of touching and stuff like that, and it helps them bond and feel comfortable, then that's great. If they're not there yet, because maybe touch is a sensitive thing for them, then you just let them kind of lead that. But yeah, it is true. Some tactics might be dependent on the kid's age or gender. Did you have?
I was thinking back to the fire situation, and if I couldn't bring anything with me, and if I had to go to work the next day, there's some things that I'm used to having, like I'm used to having my makeup and doing that at work, or doing that for work. So if you have a teenager come into your house and you don't even think about something like, well, they have to go to school the next day, what do they usually have that they don't have with them now? Is it something as little as makeup? But that's going to totally affect them when they usually have that. If it's their cereal they usually eat in the morning, like little things, I feel like could really throw it off.
Yeah, that's great. Just going to them and asking them, like, what are the things that would be helpful for you to have? What things do you need? So, yeah, that's good. How else can we build trust with our kiddos?
I would just think for, if it was if you had a boy, take him to a game, a ball game or something.
Do some sort of fun activity together.
Something, where you just go together and there's no real expectations maybe, but just time together.
Yeah. Yep.
And like I said, I think boys attach differently than girls. Girls would probably be more into conversation types of things. Boys may be more experiential. I think you'd have to read that, but
to do together, hands-on.
Yeah, hands-on, or if their thing is art, taking them to things that they're interested in and just being with them and spending time with them. And
Yep, that's great.
I wonder if something like if I was in a stranger's house, I would not want to be making small talk or like hanging out with them. So I wonder if in their room, just like giving them a supply of like art supplies. And so right there, if they need to be kind of alone, which I'm anticipating that about me, I would want that. You still have stuff available for them and art, you can work through things with art.
Right.
So just not making them have to be around you, if that sounds, that's weird. But I just know as an introvert, I would need to be kind of by myself, especially in a scary situation.
And safe places to create and do things like that. So to have books, art supplies, whatever available for them in their room, but maybe also to have it available a side table off the kitchen so that if they do want to be around people but not necessarily having to engage, that they can come sit, out there and be around, or, have you be present so you can start making, little connections, little small talk. Hey, can I grab you a snack? Or, hey, that looks really good. Start making those connections. But yeah, that's a great idea, having art supplies or basketballs or whatever around. Also, I think we feel good when we think that, or when we know that people trust us, right? If somebody gives us a responsibility, we feel like they think that we can handle it, and that makes us feel good. And so I think it's helpful to give them small tasks that show that you, give them some trust, and that helps them trust you. When the relationships getting established, see if they want to be the one in charge of feeding the dog, or asking if they can wipe the table after dinner. Giving them some trust, right? So they makes them feel good about themselves, and they kind of in turn will start to build that trust relationship. That's great, though. Anything else before we move on? Any other ideas? That's good. I think it's also important to remember, because they've talked about sometimes we feel cautious with kids, like, am I being manipulated? Are they trying to, if you have an older kid or a younger kid who's trying to, whatever, get out of school, or, lying about something they did or whatever. They talk about this more, and Ross talks about this more, but ultimately, with everything that kid has been through, if even if they're trying to manipulate you, at a certain point you kind of say, you know, who cares? You know, we still have a job to do here. We still have a bond to take care of. We still have a relationship to build, attachment to do. Yes, those behaviors do eventually get addressed. And we're not saying, you know, give a kid the keys to your car. Like, you still need to have some boundaries. But to just prioritize the relationship over some of these other things that maybe as natural parents we would shift that a little bit. You know, does that make sense? Making sure we're prioritizing that relationship. Also, to become a student of our kids. We said everybody needs somebody who feels crazy about them, right? So we're all hardwired different. I'm very different from my husband. My kids are very different from each other. Even my kids who are biologically related to each other are very different from each other. I'm like, how did you come from the same parents? And I'll give you the perfect example. So again, when we brought our kids home, my daughter was 6, my son was 2. They both had been together their whole life. But when we adopted them to my daughter, this experience was traumatic and exciting. Because her personality, she's like, awesome, I'm getting on an airplane. Awesome, this strange lady speaking a different language keeps giving me a bunch of candy. Like, this is kind of a fun, exciting adventure. You know, she was thinking, like, this is scary what just happened to my life, but this is also kind of exciting. Like, what's going to happen next? To my son, who has a very different temperament than her, it was just scary. Like, I just lost my home. I don't like this strange food. I don't know this language these people are speaking. And it was just scary. Same situation, same environment to the same environment. To one child, it was traumatic, but also kind of exciting. And to the other child, it was just, what the heck just happened to my life? So we got to become a student of our kids to kind of gauge what they can handle and the best way. So for my daughter, it was okay to engage in, she wanted to play. She wanted to have, you know, exciting, she wanted to blow bubbles and knock a ball back and forth and all that kind of stuff. And my son just wanted to be held because he was really overstimulated. He was really like he didn't know if he was okay with everything that was going on. Had very different responses. Again, with my son, because of his temperament and kind of how he's wired, surprises are not a good thing. My daughter loves surprises. If she walks home from school and you say, I have a surprise, she'll be like, awesome, what is it? Well, a couple years ago, I had a friend give us an old Xbox, and I was like, oh man, my son's going to love this. And so he was at school, and I set it up in the basement, and he got home from school, and I was like, hey buddy, I got a surprise. And he fell on the floor and started crying. And my kind of first gut reaction was, well, way to ruin that. You know? I was so excited. I was all sneaky. I set it up while you were at school. I was anticipating this big, like, you're the best mom ever moment. And he fell on the floor and started crying. And I had to, you know, hit the pause button and realize, who am I talking to? To this particular child, surprise equals unknown, and unknown always equals bad, right? So surprise, it was not a good thing with him. I picked him up off the floor, I took him downstairs, he saw the Xbox, he was very happy, and then I had the you're the best mom ever moment. But we have to become a student of our kids, right? We learn them, and we don't have to figure all this out up front, right? This takes time to kind of learn them, and their temperaments, their likes, their dislikes, and the ways that are best, you know, to establish a relationship with them. So I think becoming a student of your kid, very important. Again, meeting those perceived needs. Even if I'm thinking, I'm not really sure that's a need. I also think that a lot of kids, and a lot of adults too, but some kids in these situations will have food issues. You know, if you've ever gone without food, that kind of never really leaves you. And so for kids who have food issues, there are, I mean, what are some ideas that you guys can think of for a kid who has food issues? How do you give them some sort of just promise or understanding that they won't go without? Can you think of any
having food in the house, not letting it go bare. So I know right now sometimes it's like, whoa, I need to go buy food. I don't have anything. As a kid, that might be pain-induced. So just kind of making sure you always see a full pantry or full refrigerator.
Sure.
I have a shelf in my pantry that's at eye level with my grandkids, and that's free for all.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Having one area, a basket on the countertop, whatever. You can choose what's in the basket, you know, granola bars, apples, bananas, but they know that they can always take anything they want out of there. You know, something that we've done in the past too is, you know, so the kid runs up to you, I'm so starving, I can't wait another second, and they're starting to have a meltdown, but it's 10 minutes till dinner, and I just spent an hour and a half in the kitchen, and I don't want to ruin that. And so, you know what, here, son, here's a granola bar, okay, some snapper. I want you to hold this in your hand, okay? Please do not eat the granola bar yet, because we're eating in 10 minutes, and dinner's going to be so good, it's your favorite. But you keep that with you, and then as soon as dinner's over, if you want to eat it, go right ahead. And what that does is it tells the brain, like, I have access to food. I can wait that 10 minutes because I have access to food. And I've heard of this happening, you know, often. There's something about hunger. If you've ever experienced, not like my tummy is growling and I can't wait till dinner, but going days without food or having it be a normal part of your life, you don't forget that. And so it's easy to have that fear of food not always being present. So having little, you know, tools or tips to make sure they always have access to food. And it's okay to have some guidelines, some rules. It's okay to say, you know, hey, we don't bring food into our bedrooms because we don't want to have ants or whatever. But again, we have this basket on the kitchen counter, and you're allowed to take stuff out of there anytime you want. And then don't get them in trouble. Like, you wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning because you hear some rustling in the kitchen, and there's a kid down there, you know, taking a banana or granola bar out of the basket. You know, what are you doing up? It's 2 o'clock in the morning. We're not supposed to eat in the middle of the night. It's just, hey buddy, did you get what you need? Awesome, let me walk you back to your bedroom. Like, you gotta build that safety. They don't need more reasons to feel like jumpy or like, can I trust you, right? So we're building that err on the side of nurture. Any questions or thoughts with that stuff?
So I have a question about how you promote attachments. If you have a teen coming into your home and they have a cell phone and they just hole up somewhere on their cell phone, just kind of let that happen? Or, how do you attach?
Yeah, well, and I think with every kid, you kind of, depending on the age, you kind of have to set up guidelines, right? This is a tricky one when you're not their parent and they're used to doing things a certain way. But I think it's okay to say, you know, we all have, part of the home study process is, or you do it before the home study, but writing out kind of your family rule, household guidelines, rules, whatever, and then you go over them with the kid just so they know the expectations, and you can kind of lay out a boundary. Hey buddy, we're going to do, you know, from 5 to 6, you know, you're totally welcome to play on your phone, and then at 6 o'clock when we have dinner, I'd really like to leave the phones in the other room, and we're going to have family time, or, you know, but I think it's okay to have a boundary, and then just kind of take it step by step from there. Because also, one thing that makes kids feel really safe, even though they claim to hate it, structure, right? Structure, routine, predictability, especially kids in foster care, because their life just got turned upside down. If we can give them the better structure, routine, predictability we can give them, so they know this is a guideline, you know, like, this is where I sleep. This is our routine during Monday to Friday. This is the 2 hours in the evening when I'm not supposed to look at my phone because we're going to engage together as a family. Just providing that, again, even if they kind of buck against it because they're new or they're unsure or they're just trying to prove themselves, to try to gently stay in the parameters of, you know, that routine will ultimately make them feel safe, because they want to know that they can count on how you respond, what the structure of the home is, what your routine is, because that will make them feel more safe. So, and then engage with them too, about, especially with teens. Say, here's what I'm feeling about this. Tell me your thoughts on it, and can we come up with a plan together for maybe when would be good screen time and when we feel like we can have, when we can have screenless time, to read a book or play a game or talk. Because I think especially with teens, when we let them be a part of that process, and with all kids, with younger kids too, if we let them be a part of the process, then they're more likely to stay inside those boundaries, right? Because they were part of, putting the phone away at 7 p.m. was technically her idea, so she might be more likely to stick to it. So, yeah, but I definitely think it's good to sit down and, figure that stuff out together, but to have those parameters and those guidelines is very good.
It's interesting about the food. Our daughter has Prader-Willi syndrome. She feels always like she's starving. Like there's no off switch for her. But we found, and we have a lot of family friends that also have Prader-Willi kiddos, but we found Clara has a very strict structure, and she likes it that way. And if it's part of her meal planning,
she
and
feels safe
eats
in
it.
there.
Oh yeah, and she eats it at set times every day, and then we don't have to lock anything because she knows what to expect, and she also knows there's no hope. Like she doesn't even have to try to push for anything else because this is it, and she's okay with that. And so I feel like even possibly for kiddos coming in that have food issues, if they have visuals or hands-on preparations, they might be more at ease too and less sneaky about it. Like Clara doesn't feel the need to sneak. We have a lot of friends where their kids feel like they want to sneak, or they get maybe food that is not the best for them, because any sugar foods will trigger their anxiety and hunger, appetite, whatever you want to call it, even more. So if you keep her on a good sugar level, like the blood sugar levels, I feel like that helps too, and maybe even with the kiddos coming from the outside too, if they eat rather healthy, then obviously there's junk food too, but not like it all.
Absolutely, and that could be a whole nother class, probably just addressing nutrition and all that kind of stuff. But and that's why I suggest things like fruits that still feel sweet. It's not like, well, if you want anything to eat, there's a stalk of broccoli over there. Otherwise, you're not put it in there. They're not healthy. You can have as much of it as you want. Eat a whole cucumber. That would be great, but
Clara would do that actually and get a kick out of it if we let her.
I think I had a kid who was eating a cucumber like a banana one day. But it is true that there is some, like the more sugary and processed foods that they're eating, that also will impact their behavior and their, neurons and all that kind of stuff negatively. So finding finding balance, for sure, definitely helps. But yeah, that's really great stuff that you do with your daughter, and that could be very helpful with foster kids too, that they know they're not going to be deprived. There's a plan in place. And if you find that there is something specific that is kind of an issue for your specific kid, chat with your home supervisor, caseworker, that kind of stuff. You can get ideas and input other foster parents when because right now we're just speaking in hypotheticals, right? We don't even know what age kids you guys are going to end up with. So we can cover all of the basics, and then when you have a specific kid in your home and you get to know their specific needs, there are people around that can help you kind of hash those things out. So, yeah, that's great. All right, let me see here. We've covered what we needed to cover. So yeah, again, just to remember, their job is to test you, and your job is to prove that you are stable, consistent, and safe. I also think it's important to, if you do have a kid who's having an outburst, even if they're directing it towards you, to take a step back and realize this is not about me, right? Because we're ultimately doing this for the good of the kids, and so we have to make sure that we're not making things about us. And again, that's why I say go to your safe space, whether it's a best friend, a spouse, your support group, another family to become friends with in the foster care world. to be able to vent those things, but don't take on everything a child says or does and make it about you, because it's not about you. It's about the stuff that they're going through. And when we start to feel safe or vulnerable with somebody, that's who we take our stuff out on, right? And we all do it, right? We're going to be nice to the lady, or to our boss, or the lady in the grocery store, or whatever, and then we're going to go home and, ream into our kids or the dog or whoever because we had a bad day. And so just remembering to find out what's behind the behavior, right? See behind the behavior. And if you feel like it's an impersonal attack, just remember, take a step back and remember that it's not about you, and you need to prove to be a consistent, safe place for the kid, and they will work through it. Were some of you at the foster parent conference we did a couple weeks ago? You were there, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. We had a teen talk about how he tested his foster parents, right? And he did push hard, and the thing that finally broke and got through to him is the fact that they stayed stable and consistent and safe with him, and they proved, like, buddy, we're not going anywhere. But because he had been let down so much by so many people his whole life, they had quite a job to prove that, that they weren't going to let him down. So, but eventually they got there. Every kid, the worst thing we can do is write these kids off, right? Especially I think of the older ones, the teens. And they're really great kids. There's a reality you have to be prepared for. This is not easy work. But there's also the other side of the coin where it's like, these kids are not doomed. They're not terrible human beings. They are not bad kids. That's not why they're in foster care. They're in foster care because somebody else let them down, right? And then they just have survival mechanisms that they've had to put in place. I've also had people ask, how much attaching do we really want to do if the placement's not going to be permanent, right? So if we're only going to have a kid for a month, do we really want to go all in and full out attach with them? Is that going to hurt them in the future then when they just have to leave my home? Is that just going to be another hurt? And it might be another hurt for them and for you, but I think it's really important to remember that every successful attachment we have with these kids, every successful, positive, trusting, loving attachment that they develop just sets them up for success the next place they go. Right? So whether they're going to be in your home forever, well, hopefully not forever, like they move out when they're 35 or something, but whether they're going to be yours forever or they're only going to stay with you a week or two, every kid needs you to give them everything. To fully jump in, to bond, to love them, to build that trusting relationship, because like I said, even if they're not staying, it just sets them up for success in the next place. And then they can get there. They can get to that place where they can trust and they can bond, right? My 6-year-old daughter was she's 14 and a half now, but she was able to attach pretty quickly to my husband and I because she was successfully attached to her caregiver before me. And I knew a lot of people who adopted kids much younger than ours who had tremendous attachment issues. And it was because their child maybe had been abandoned at birth or as an infant or as a toddler, and then they never got an opportunity to attach to a primary caregiver. So even though my daughter losing her first mother and her caregivers was traumatic and painful for her, she was able to see me as mom and attach to me as mom, and now I feel like we just have any sort of typical mother-teenage-daughter relationship. Because she was set up for success by the people who came before me. They attached to her, she attached to them, and so she had the tools to do it with me. I think that's really important. So, do you guys have questions? We are nearing the end of our evening. Questions about any of this stuff or questions about your home study, because I do home studies, so I'm a good person to ask. So, anything?
I was thinking about the trundle bed, because that's not allowed, right? and we bought this amazing trundle bed in preparation. But a friend of mine said something very interesting that got me thinking, because I was wondering what's wrong with a trundle bed if they can have a bunk bed. What's, because it's a really safe, modern, new thing. But then he got me thinking, because when do we pull out the trundle bed? Right now, when somebody's there just for a night, because a kiddo has a sleepover.
It's a temporary bed.
Yeah, and he made me think, he was like, yeah, it feels very impermanent, don't you think?
Yeah.
And I was like, I was thinking safety, but maybe it's really about the psychological thing. Of
and that is why, just because a kid who's in for a placement needs a permanent bed, whether that is, a bunk bed or the top part of a trundle, just because, and again, it's functionality-wise, trundle bed is fine, right? Move it over to the boom, you got 2 beds.
Yeah.
But it is that if a kid is coming into your home to stay, they do need a more permanent fixture of a bed, and some of that is psychological, just so that they know I'm a member of this home for however long I'm here, not a temporary sleepover guest. So I think that's the main thought behind it.
I have a question about the trundle bed too. So it's okay to have a trundle bed as long as that's not their bed.
All right, there's no problems with having a trundle bed, but a kid who is...
If they wanted to have a sleepover with a friend from school or something.
If you have a placement in the home, they just need to have a permanent bed, but...
Yeah. Okay, so let me ask you, if you have a siblings that share a room, and one of the trundle beds, I understand it's a pop-up. I wouldn't put a child on it, permanently. But we have one that is a bed in a drawer. If you were going to do them separately as 2 beds, does it matter that it's on the floor?
I'm not sure, actually, because I do have to have 2 permanent beds.
Like it could be a permanent bed.
It just happens to look like
well,
a drawer.
It's you know what I mean. It's a mattress in a drawer that slips under.
I don't know if that would qualify as the same. If that would be.
It doesn't pop up though. It just. It's a platform bed.
Right.
Yeah.
I am not 100% sure.
Okay. I guess whoever comes over will let me know.
Yeah, and if you guys have questions about things that are actually in your home that are easier to see them. We don't do the facility check part of the home study until the very end, like our last visit, and so we'll be in your home a couple times before then if you want to say, hey, can you check out this, or what are your thoughts on this? So, because, I've never gotten that one before.
Well, I wouldn't use it unless I needed it.
Right.
Bed.
Okay.
Yeah, so in a trundle, the top is okay.
Yeah.
Because it's solid. Yeah. But the bottom is not.
Yeah.
So what about like closet space and stuff? I'm trying to figure, I have these rooms that are, we've had people coming and going out of our house. So I'm trying to figure out, what do I need to do? Do I need to purge closets out? Is the room supposed to be basically a bed, maybe a dresser, and an empty closet house?
Well, the room that you'll be using for foster care needs to be set up as the child's room, as in no like storage in the closet, stuff like that.
Oh, you just lost me.
So they, for them to be able to use that as their room, it might be a little bit different if it's just like a weekend respite type of situation. You don't have to clear out the closets, but if you have a kid who's moving in with you, they need to have access to that room. So to find another place for, storage or winter coats or stuff like that.
My craft room.
So if we're saying we will take multiple kids, you would need to see like bunk bed in the room before allowing, like for right now I have one full-size bed in the room, but I'm okay to take siblings. I can definitely buy stuff to accommodate that. So when you do the home study, do we already have to have that like available? So I'm saying I might take multiples. I already need to have a bunk bed in place or multiple beds in the same room.
Well, you can be as prepared as you would like to be. If you know that you want to take 2 kids, it's not a bad idea to get the bunk bed. But also because, if you have an age range, I'll take anything 0 to 18, you might not have a crib and like everything that every kid between the ages of 0 and 18 could possibly need. you can have what you have, and then when we actually call you with a placement, you can get better prepared, and we have resources to help you with that as well.
So we don't have to understand it as preparing it beforehand. Like, you don't want my house to be completely baby-proof, baby-gated.
I want to see that if you are open to a baby, you have access to that stuff.
Yeah, that's too easy. But again, like what you just said, the crib, because we have everything 0 to,
Yeah.
you know.
Because if you're going to get a 14-year-old, you won't need that crib.
Right, that's why I didn't want to set it up.
Yeah, so some is just having access to those things. Like, I'll just want to see, but also there is some wiggle room there because you don't know the age of the kid. So, like I said, you might not need to have a crib set up if you're, open to teenagers. But having access to stuff, and then again, once you actually know the age of your placement, we can get better prepared. Because some of the stuff on the facility checklist, like having outlet plugs and all that kind of stuff, if you're saying, oh, we're going to take school-age kids, then that doesn't apply, to you. But if you're open to younger ones and having access to those things, whether they're set up or you can show me that you have them.
So do you not get called at 3 a.m. and have to take a kid? I mean, if you...
Me personally?
I mean, no.
You guys?
Yeah. I mean, you're not 100% prepared. Like, I don't...
We can work with you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we can work with you.
If it's a baby, they're bringing you a porta crib with the baby.
Yeah, if it's an emergency placement, like we'll work with you. Yeah. So the guidelines with that facility checklist, that you all have that list of things you have to take care of. That's just kind of the state mandated list of things that need to be completed in all, licensed Colorado.
And they're not worried about furniture, like if you have a chest of drawers, they're not worried about that falling forward on the kid, or
I mean,
how does that all fit in?
If that's a legitimate risk in that child's room, then you would need to anchor that.
Well, isn't it like a risk pretty much in any kid's room? I mean, a chest of drawers, all they have to do is pull them out and start climbing.
I mean, I'm not going through every room and tagging on So I'm more just going through that list and making sure, are these things that you have your 5-pound fire extinguisher, do you have window well covers, do you have your, weapons, do you have guns locked and ammo locked separately, and medication has to be locked. Those are the big things that have to be behind an actual lock. And so I've told people get a little lockbox. Yeah, get one of those Tupperware boxes with you can stick a padlock through it, or a toolbox or something. Throw all your medication in there and put a lock on it, or stick it all in a hall closet and put a lock on that doorknob. It doesn't matter how it's locked. It's just medication has to be locked.
I like that.
Yes. So, any other questions regarding homestay stuff or anything?
Well, this has more to do with the kid coming in. So, how much do we get in terms of the background of the kid or the family or the situation when they're coming in as preparation?
So we'll give you what we have, and then if more information trickles in later. So if we're right at the time of placement, we might not have a ton of information, but then as more comes in, we'll give it to you. But we'll give you the information that we have. We might call you and say, hey, we have a 2-year-old and a 7-year-old and their siblings, and they're coming from this place, and here's what we do or do not know about why they were removed, from the home. It's kind of situational, but we'll give you the information that we have.
At what age do they need to be on the same level as you? That's important.
0 to 5 have to be, their bedroom has to be on the same level as your bedroom.
Okay.
So if you got a master bedroom here and the available room on a different floor, then you have to take a kid over the age of 5. So 0 to 5, they just have to be in close proximity.
I already warned my 14-year-old he's going to be transient.
Yeah, and we can do that to bio kids, right? They can sleep on the bottom of a trundle bed or switch bedrooms or whatever. We just can't do it with the foster kids.
And is it also something, because it's the same thing in our case too, let's say you needed us for 5 or younger, our older one would go down, but that's nothing we have to arrange before you come to show you.
No, if you just make it work. If you actually get a call with the placement of a 3-year-old, you can say, okay, then we'll do this.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. And if they're under 18 months, they can stay in your bedroom, but then you need to have a plan for what happens when they're over 18 months.
Okay.
Fair enough.
I have another adult who lives with me who's also going through this. It's not like going to be licensed and all. That the room that it's going to be the room there is right next to their room. Would that also still qualify for the under 5? There is an adult right in the next room, or
whoever's
I
licensed,
personally have to. Okay.
Yeah, whoever's licensed has to be close proximity. Same. Yeah. Okay. So if they're under 5. Anything else? All right. Awesome. Well, you guys did great. I hope this is just like a teaser. I know there's a attachment 2.0 that I think you watched. As Jackie does that video. So it's a lot of information, and you just absorb what you can, and then come back when it's, you know, like I said, it's all situational, it's all hypothetical right now until you get some kids in your home, and then hopefully you'll have some good tools to use. And also just never hesitate to call your home supervisor for support systems. So, all right, we are good to go. Thanks, guys. You did great. Thank you.
So most kids that get placed, are they, is that the first time you've met them, or is there usually a little history with them?
Like when they come into your
I mean, do you guys know them? Do you guys typically know them?